It's a row that has spilled over from the letters pages of the newspapers into open acrimony. Should the NHS pay for homeopathic treatments? Homeopaths are at loggerheads with scientists and doctors, supported by an independent charity called Sense About Science, best known for its campaign in favour of GM crops. Now that dispute is threatening the provision of complementary medicine on the NHS. A London homeopathic hospital has lost 20% of its funding over the last year. And next week, a primary care trust will vote on whether to stop financing a hospital in Kent. Our social affairs correspondent Victoria MacDonald reports.
An NHS pharmacy in an NHS hospital. Only all the bottles and tubes contain not drugs but natural ingredients, homeopathic medicines. And that's the point. Not do they or don't they work, but should the taxpayer be paying for them? It's an increasingly acrimonious row between the homeopaths themselves and a group of mainly retired but eminent doctors and scientists.
Really, it offends their view of the way things are. They think they know, what happens and what doesn't happen, and homeopathy is something that can't happen according to their understanding of the way the world is. And for these people, who have a lot invested in knowing how drugs work, that is very offensive.
There is no evidence worthwhile that it works at all. And the reasons go deeper than that, considerably deeper actually, because once you start accepting things for which there is no evidence, there's no stopping. The next thing it'll be astrology on the NHS, or Chanel No. 5 on the NHS. Aromatherapy is not so different from that.
And it appears the scientists' campaign, though they don't like that word, is having an effect. The Royal London Homeopathic Hospital has seen a 20% fall in patients over the past year as a growing number of primary care trusts, 4 in the past few months, refused to fund them.
Primary care trust at the moment are not funding for appointments to this hospital.
Indeed, just as we were waiting to interview the hospital's medical director, we witnessed this patient, an Iraqi refugee who'd been tortured, being warned he would now have to pay for his own treatment.
They give me a treatment, medication, but from grasses or something homeopathic, but it's good for me. Yeah. When I take another medication, it's not good for my stomach. But when I take this one, it's good for my health.
There's always been a massive argument over whether alternative medicines actually do work. Take something like arnica. Does it really stop bruising, or is it nothing more than a sugar-coated pill? But now this debate has gone to a whole new level, with those for alternative medicines saying that the critics are using underhand tactics to stop it being funded by the NHS.
Firstly, there was this document sent by the campaign to PCTs to help them persuade their boards to stop funding the treatments. In the corner was an NHS logo, which the homeopaths claim made it look official.
Well, it does say insert your NHS logo here. This was not issued to the public, of course. It was only sent to trusts, and it was intended as a template that would summarise the evidence for them and save them some time and some money.
Underhand or not, the Department of Health has been asked to investigate. And the homeopaths query the involvement of an independent organisation called Sense About Science, set up to promote what they call evidence-based debate.
Sense About Science is essentially an industry-funded lobby group which in the past has campaigned very forcefully in favour of genetically modified crops and insecticides. That is their history, and of being linked. So they are linked to high-tech industry. More recently, they seem to have turned their attention to medicine and are receiving funding from the pharmaceutical industry.
This was their response.
Peter Fisher's desperate comments show about as much grasp of reality as the homeopathic medicine he sells.
We've also seen this email from the Association of Public Health Directors. They help PCTs decide on what to fund, confirming they have been working closely with Sense About Science on publicity. It carries on to say their PR advice was that the campaign for the removal of homeopathy from any NHS contract was a hot potato, so to avoid direct association with it. Dr. Tim Crayford, who wrote the email, said it was more important to focus on what the campaign is about.
It's more to do with the point of principle that there are very many really effective treatments that the NHS can't currently afford to provide, and should we not be ensuring that the limited resources that we've got on the NHS go to the things that really work well and that are going to save lives?
The NHS budget for the 4 homeopathic hospitals in the UK is comparatively small, £5 million a year at the Royal London, for instance. Next week, though, the Tunbridge Wells Hospital could lose its main NHS funding when West Kent PCT votes on whether to withdraw its contract.
We spend in total just under £200,000 per annum within the PCT, and whilst that might not seem much in the context of a budget approaching £700 or £800 million with the PCT as a whole, on an annualised basis that's a lot of treatments received, that's a lot of patients who could potentially receive new drugs.
We are dealing with complex chronic patients who would otherwise be going round the loop, who would be having a lot of investigations, expensive investigations, which would be adding little to their treatment, and fancy drugs which often don't help and sometimes cause severe side effects. So I think the evidence does actually suggest that we save money.
But do you have that evidence? That's always been the problem with homeopathic medicine. I mean, if you talk about whether you save money, have you ever actually done any cost analysis to show me that you are actually saving money?
It has certainly been done in Germany. We know it is very complex to prove it. It's an enormous undertaking to prove conclusively that we are saving money.
And that, according to the critics, has always been the problem, proving alternative therapies work. This acupuncture clinic has recently been given unprecedented funding, £150,000, by the independent think tank, the King's Fund, to see if they can back up their claims with science.
The medical profession wants proof, and they should have proof. And the complementary therapists in general fall back on it works because I see my patients get better. And we've got to get away from both those things. We've got to research complementary therapy in a way that's appropriate to those therapies.
Critics have asked the Department of Health to resolve this issue once and for all, but ministers are keeping quiet on this one, maybe because of the relatively small sums involved, or perhaps it's because there is a reasonable amount of public support. 1 in 4 adults are said to have used complementary therapies, including, of course, the Queen and Prince Charles.
Victoria MacDonald. Over to Carl Dinnan now for a look at more